Hey guys, welcome back to the Fiction Blueprint podcast. Today I am going to be sharing day 2 of my workshop. Uh, I mentioned it before. If you remember, I was doing a workshop called 4 Secret Keys to Writing a Highly Emotional Novel that will knock your reader's socks off in 6 months or less. And by the time this podcast episode posts, will be pretty much done. If you are interested in getting the replays of the workshop, you can still purchase them. I will put the link in the show notes, and you will also, if you do it soon enough before Monday, what is the date? It's next Monday. So before Monday the 13th, of 2025, then you can also get in on the outlining lab that I'm doing. So VIP has those 2 things. But as I said, by the time you get this, the actual workshop will probably be over. And that's the only way to get a hold of it is to buy the replays. So I will put that in the show notes. Anyway, so I decided that I wanted to use one of the trainings as a podcast episode, and I decided on day 2. So it's the only one that is going to be put in the podcast feed. But in a lot of ways, I think it has the most juicy information that you can absorb without actually being part of the workshop. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let you jump into that. It is a little bit longer than most of my podcasts because this was a full training that went about an hour. So just know that if you've got to cut it in half or watch it in 2 parts or, whatever you got to do that. But it is a little bit on the longer side. Okay. But I hope you enjoy it and I hope you get lots of value from it. And yeah, let's get started. Hi there. Do you have a great idea for a fiction story? A story you're dying to bring to the world, but you don't know where you're going with it, don't know how to fill out a compelling plot, and have a hard time sitting down to even write words, much less finish your story? Even when you do write, do you worry that it's boring, that it drags, and that readers are going to hate it? So you stay stuck, write and rewrite the same scenes, and eventually give up, ending up with a file of half-written manuscripts and glorious story ideas on your computer. Hi, my name is Liesl, USA Today best-selling author and writer of 4 genres, and I've been writing fiction for more than 15 years. I teach fiction authors to write highly emotional stories based on elements of psychology and spirituality, with an emphasis on your unique subconscious creativity. Did you know that human beings cannot be emotionally healthy without stories? That we'd all literally go mad if we couldn't tell ourselves stories and derive meaning from them? It's true, and a scientifically proven fact. So, grab your chocolate of choice and your fuzzy slippers. Let's turn that story snippet knocking around in your brain into a full-length novel that will give your reader that emotionally cathartic experience they long for, make you money, and change the world. Who's with me? All right, let's get started. So today we are going to talk about the hidden reasons you keep stalling out on your draft and how to fix them. All right, so really quick recap of yesterday. We talked about what your story is missing, and it's the emotion. There isn't enough emotion in your story, and on some level you can sense that, so you keep getting discouraged and often don't finish the story because you don't know how to fix it. And it's not your fault that you don't know how to fix it. You've probably never been taught how to work through things like this in a way that will actually yield you results. So I talked yesterday about how the advice given about how to hook a reader is just awful, and I hate it. Well, here's the thing though. Advice about how to fix an unemotional story really isn't any better. It's equally cringy, right? I absolutely cringe and just go, when authors say things like, oh, just keep writing book after book and one day all the stars will align and you'll have a bestseller that just knocks it out of the park. Now, I'm sure we've all probably heard this at some point, like just the best way to learn and to keep moving forward and to sell your first book is to write your next book. And there is something to that. I'm not going to say that it's horrible across the board or anything, but my issue with that is that if your first book has problems, like there's not enough emotion, it's not very well written, it's not very well planned out, you're going to take those same problems into the next book. And then you're going to just have 2 books that have the same problems and maybe 3 books. So that's not my favorite advice by far. And I do understand that when people say that, it comes from a place of trying to help authors and that really is their experience of it. Okay, you certainly can write book after book after book, and you probably will improve with each book. That's true. But really, you're just kind of hoping that you will eventually improve enough to get a lot of sales. But that can take years. I mean, do you really want to write 10 full books before you write a book that's going to really connect for readers? I mean, who wants it to take that long, right? But more to the point, saying that, one day the stars will all align, that's not a repeatable pattern that you can actually follow for success. And I don't believe that there is ever anything that we cannot figure out how to duplicate. Okay, we just have to put in the work and the time to figure it out. And people who say that, the reason they're saying it, I said this several times yesterday, it's because they don't know how else to explain it. And maybe that's not their fault, but it's really not cutting it for me. Okay. This is more of just throwing spaghetti against the wall because for so many years, authors truly could not put into words what makes a successful novel. But now you can, okay? So let's fix it and let's get you to success much, much faster, shall we? Because you now know what you need to put into your novel in order to hook readers, and it's emotion. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on you, the author. So even though you now know what you need to put into the story, there are still reasons that you could stall out that have nothing to do with the story. So really, think of it this way. There are two sides to writing a fiction story. There's what goes into the story itself, planning the actual story that you're going to write, plot, characters, world building, etc. And that's there to serve the reader and help them to feel the emotions. Okay, so that's one side of it. Then there's you, the author. You could have the most emotional story in the entire world, the next global phenomenon like Harry Potter or Twilight or what have you, floating around in your head. But if you haven't figured out how to get words onto the page, doesn't really matter, right? You're not going to be able to bring it to your readers. So sometimes, even if you know something, whether it's a lot or a little, anything about what you're about to write, it's common to simply feel resistance to getting the words on the page, right? So you're like staring at a blinking cursor. You type out a line or a paragraph, but you're not feeling it. So you delete it, you retype, you delete. As we talked about yesterday, you might write and rewrite the same scenes, the ones you feel the most emotion for, but it's hard to make progress on anything else. And you often allow yourself to get distracted by other tasks, social media, housework, taking care of pets. All those things probably need to get done, maybe not social media. But the point is, you're not prioritizing your writing. You're always allowing yourself to get distracted by that stuff. And make no mistake, it's not that stuff that's distracting you. It is you allowing yourself to be distracted. And that's because some part of your brain is putting up resistance to writing. You don't want to do it. Okay. So at the end of the day, the writing is still not getting done. And sometimes, even if you have an idea what to write, you sit down, you stare at the screen, and you just end up getting up again because you just aren't in the right headspace to get the words down. Has anyone experienced any of this? Is this resonating with you? Tell me in the chat if these are things that you are at all familiar with. Okay, I'm sure that you have tried to fix these things. Okay, yep, absolutely. All right. So you're in good company. So in order to fix it, you may have done things like buying plotting software such as Plotter or Save the Cat Beats. Of course, this includes craft books. And don't get me wrong, those things can be helpful. They can give you small breakthroughs and more power to you, right? You may have downloaded templates that promise you the perfect story arc. And again, they can help you fill in a few blanks or spur some ideas. But here's the thing. If those things, and anything else that maybe I didn't mention here, that you've done to try and fix this problem, if they had helped you finish your book entirely and you were so confident with that book, you were raring to go and pushing forward to publish, you would probably not be in this workshop. So I'm assuming that they didn't get you all the way there, even if they were helpful. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk about the 4 signs that are telling me that it's going to be hard for you to get words on the page and do your part to finish the rest of your book, okay? And of course, by showing you what they are and what mistakes that you're probably making, it will illuminate how to fix them. The other thing I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to give you my #1 tip for making words flow and busting through writer's block, okay? I tell all my students to do this, and it works like a charm. So when you leave today, you will know that there is really no such thing as writer's block. Of course, you can come up against obstacles or things you need to figure out in your story. That's just, part of writing. But there's really no such thing as block, because what I'm going to give you today is going to be the thing that helps you get through block and figure things out, so you'll never truly be blocked again. All right? Sound like a plan? Let me take a gander here. All right. All right, so sign #1 that tells me you're going to have a hard time getting words down and finishing your novel. You have no plan for getting emotion into every part of your story, or perhaps you just don't even know what the story is yet. The focal point here is plan. You haven't done enough planning. We already talked about the emotion thing yesterday, and so I kind of addressed this, but you need to be intentional about making every level and aspect of your story emotional. And we do this by following the journey of transformational human psychology, using techniques to write emotional scenes, descriptions, and even sentences that are emotional. And then you can also, if you have your first draft, I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, you can edit it in such a way as to put emotion into it in the second pass, right? Now, a lot of you were asking about transformation for the internal arc yesterday. I initially was not going to include this in today's presentation, but I just decided to do a little bit on it so that I could answer your questions and give you a little bit more of what you were asking for. So just as the 10 plot points from that mini course that I gave you the link for yesterday will help you figure out the skeleton of your story, and that is very much geared toward the plot, right? The external plot events. There are also what you might call internal plot points that you need to hit in order for your character's internal transformation to feel real and human and authentic. All right. Let me give you an example. Someone that I use in a lot of my examples is Lord of the Rings, Frodo, because Lord of the Rings is a really well put together story, and it checks all the boxes, right? So let me show you with this example what I mean by the internal versus the external arc, okay? So the plot, obviously, and I'm going to be talking about the first movie, so the Fellowship of the Ring movie, because most people have read the movie as opposed to people having read the book. Um, Obviously, the plot is what actually happens in the story. So in terms of Lord of the Rings, that would be leaving the Shire, being chased by the Black Riders, meeting Aragorn, sorry, different fantasy book, going to Rivendell, the mines of Moria, the Balrog. So what's actually happening in the plot? That is clearly the plot, that is the external. And if you were to analyze the Fellowship of the Ring using the 10 plot points, you will find every single one of the 10 plot points there. Like I said, it's a very well put together story. But what about the internal arc? Frodo's internal arc, especially for this first installment of the films, is that he's too small and inadequate to take on this task. So let's think about where we see that in the film. We see the setup of it. It's not so much his insecurity, but we see the setup of it at the beginning of the film. He's actually very content where he's living, but there's also this hint that he kind of is wanting adventure, much like his uncle Bilbo had, right? But he doesn't go to seek it on his own necessarily. Then we have several times him saying that this task is too big, the world and the conflict of it all, of the ring, is too big for him because he's a little hobbit. We have him trying to pass the ring off to someone at Rivendell saying, you know what, I'm done, someone else can take this on. We have his conversation with Galadriel asking her to take it from him, and she tries to encourage him and says, even small people can change the course of the future, all of that. And then it culminates on the banks of the river when he finally makes a decision about how he's going to move forward. Okay. So that's an example of his inner arc. It's the things he's struggling with emotionally. And I want you to notice that, I mean, there's probably a few beats of it that I missed when I just described that, but the stuff that is on the screen that actually deals with his internal arc is much smaller than the plot at large. Obviously, most of it is the plot, but it's the internal arc and when he finally makes his decision at the end of the film that is the most powerful part of the film. In fact, you can even compare, there's actually two different climactic points, if you will, going on there. And I like to think that in this particular film, they actually sort of separated the internal and the external. And they can do that because there's a lot of characters and there's a lot going on. So it's not uncommon in epic stories, but you have one climactic thing going on where most of the rest of the characters are fighting the monsters, right? The Uruk-hai that show up. And that's going on. And that's your typical climactic moment. It's high action, there's sword fighting, you're wondering if people's gonna die. I mean, there's all kinds of, and it's fantastic, right? We love that, it's fabulous. But the internal, at least for Frodo, is happening somewhere else entirely. It's on the banks of the river, him and Sam, right? And even though the sword fighting and all of that is fantastic and we love it, I still remember seeing that in the theaters and there was actual cheering and applause going on. Okay, so people are into it and it's fabulous. It's super fun. But in terms of what is more emotionally powerful, the stuff with Frodo and Sam is always going to be more powerful because it's the internal change. Okay. So all I'm saying is that there's the internal arc and then there's the plot, and they need to be woven together. And just as I have that set of 10 plot points for the plot to help you figure out your skeleton of the plot, I also have plot points for the internal arc. So that's what I mean. And they follow the all the steps of human transformation that we go through every day, all day, every change we make. Okay, so it's just using psychology and energetics a little bit to plot your story. And because those things are real and we all experience them all the time, every day, that makes it feel real to us. It makes us so that we, the readers, can put ourselves into the shoes of the characters more easily. And of course, that's going to give us more emotion because we're experiencing what they're experiencing. All right. So I wanted to throw that in terms of explaining the internal and the transformation arc a little bit more. But my point here, in terms of signs that you're going to have a hard time finishing your story, is that you need to have these things planned out. And if you don't, well, let me keep going because I explain it a little bit here. The step-by-step planning that I'm suggesting that you do serves both sides of the equation that I talked about. As we talked about yesterday, it infuses the story with emotion. Remember how I said that the internal arc especially gives you the most emotion, and it's what's going to lead directly to the catharsis. And that's what hooks the reader, of course, keeps them turning pages and gives them a deeply emotional and cathartic experience. But having this plan also serves you, the author, in helping you get it written. Because when you sit down to write a scene and you don't have any clue what you're going to write, what's going to happen, or how you plan to get the reader to feel the emotion of the scene, your brain immediately becomes overwhelmed. And you may not realize that. Maybe when you're sitting down writing, you're not consciously thinking to yourself, I'm overwhelmed. But your brain is, whether you know it or not, okay? You don't know what to do, and it feels too big and too daunting, and the brain is just going to get stressed out and shut down. All right. So there's an old book, kind of old now. I think it was written 10 or 15 years ago by Rachel Aaron, called 2K to 10K. And I read it a long time ago. If you want to read it, it's a good book. I would recommend it, but I'm going to give you the basic premise of it right now. Her whole premise is that planning leads to greater productivity. So she went from writing, you're really struggling to write 2,000 words a day. And then when she started planning, rather than just pantsing it, she went up to 10K words per day. Now, I'm not saying that you all will or even should write that many words per day. That's not the point. You know, how many you write is going to be up to you and your lifestyle. But I do think that she's right, that planning, even the smallest bit of planning, will increase your productivity and the words, your output of words, by at least a factor of 5, right? It's amazing the difference. So by having a plan, you're making things easier. You're breaking things down into bite-sized chunks, and you know what to do. So you're not going to freeze up. Your brain isn't going to get overwhelmed, and the writing starts to flow. So if you have absolutely no plan, chances are quite good that you're going to have a hard time finishing your draft. All right. A note on pantsing, because I know this is the next question I'm going to get, but what about if I like to pants and I don't want to plan? That's okay. That's actually fine. We all start out pantsing. It's just the nature of the thing. We go, oh, I would like to write a story. And then we sit down to start figuring it out. Okay. I do notice, you guys, across the board, every author I've ever met that continued to write and was really successful, and I know quite a few of them, they plan more and more and more with each story. So they might have started out with no planning or very little, but what happens is it gets easier, like anything, once you get a couple of books under your belt. But they also want to cut down their writing time and write really good quality books, but more efficiently, a little faster if they can. And they do that by planning. So that really should tell you something, even though maybe they started out not planning because they just really didn't know any better. The more books they write, the more seasoned they become, the more of a plan goes into that book. So think about that. Try to learn from that. Okay. Now, despite having said that, if pantsing your first draft or, discovery writing, if that is what lights you up because you just love doing it that way, then more power to you. I am here to support you in that. Okay. That's perfectly fine. I do recommend you plan 1 or 2 things to write toward as a pantser. So just a few little details, and then you can commence with the pantsing. And that's just to cut down on wasted time. Okay. But ultimately, your writing process is up to you. So I do teach plenty of people who pants. And if you want to, what I will say is that a lot of people, and this is not everyone, so don't come at me, but there are a lot of new writers who pants simply because they've never been taught how to outline effectively. So they say, I can't outline. I have to sit down and start typing or nothing comes. And I believe you, 100%. You're right about that. But I can teach you how to make the outlining work and flow. And once people learn how to do that, suddenly a lot of them are not pantsers anymore. So again, just something to keep in mind. And we're going to talk about why that happens, what's going on here in just a minute. Okay, but the point is, even if you're a hardcore pantser who just wants to pants your entire story, cool. But once you've finished that first draft, pantsed it, figured out what your story is, you still need a plan for how to get emotion into your scenes and make your scenes really digestible and easily readable for the readers. And I promise you that first draft that you pantsed is not going to cut it. Okay, I can guarantee there's not enough in there to satisfy the reader. So my point is, whether you are a hardcore pantser or a hardcore plotter or anything in between, this still applies to you. You still need, no matter what your process is for writing your first draft, you still need a plan for how to edit it and make it really emotional for the reader. Okay. And this is what I meant when I said a few minutes ago that you can totally go through the first draft and just get the action down if you want, if that's how you write. But then the second draft is when you're going to go back through and edit for emotion. And I can show you how to do that too. Okay, excuse me. Sign number 2 that you may have trouble finishing your first draft. You aren't writing from your subconscious mind. Okay, what does this mean? Things like subconscious and conscious mind are coming into the mainstream a lot more these days. A lot more people know what they are, but not everybody does. So just so that we are all on the same page, I'm going to give you a few basic definitions here, okay? We all have 2 minds. Really, we have 3, but we're only going to be concerned with 2 today, and that is the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind takes care of day-to-day activities, okay? So it's everything you do throughout the day when you are present and everything that you are like physically doing. So this is the mind that takes care of concentrating on things, to-do lists, driving to work, picking up the kids, making dinner, just all the things you go through. It's very focused on the logical, in the moment, in the present moment, and the 3D or the physical, right? The subconscious mind is the opposite of that. The subconscious mind is everything that is non-physical. It houses emotions, creativity, and imagination, among other things. So, as you might imagine, your subconscious mind is pretty important in getting your book written because all of your creativity comes from there. And if we're writing an emotional book, those also come from your subconscious mind, not to mention your imagination, right? So you need to be writing your book from your subconscious mind, but we'll get into that more in a minute. Let me give you an example of these. It's important to know that switching between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind isn't even something that you have to work very hard to do. We actually all do it all the time. So imagine the last time you were reading a good book. Any book, something that you were really into and really enjoying. I want you to think about the experience of that. So you are sitting or lying down wherever it is that you like to read, maybe in your favorite easy chair or laying on your bed or wherever that is. You can be reading a print book or something on your Kindle or something on your phone, whatever it is. But when we read a story, we're not really looking at the words, right? We haven't done that since like kindergarten when we learned to sound words out. Now that we know how to read, we sort of relax our brain and the meaning of the words comes into our heads. And what do? We imagine it. We are imagining the story playing out in our head, right? That is us getting lost in the subconscious mind. So this is important to know. Readers experience books, experience stories with their subconscious mind because it's all in their imagination, right? It's not in front of them playing out. So I want you to imagine that you're reading that book and just what that is like when you get lost in a novel like that. And then in the outer room, something goes crash, really loud, right? So what happens? It jerks you out of the story and back into reality. And chances are you get up to go see what the crash was, right? So that was you switching from your subconscious mind back to your conscious mind. Then after you get everything squared away in the other room, hopefully nothing too drastic, you come sit back down and get right back into your book again. And you switch from the conscious mind back into the subconscious mind so that you can enjoy the book. So you see that we switch between them very easily all the time. Another example of this is, I'm sure you've all probably had this experience of driving somewhere mindlessly. So it can be to or from work, to or from a favorite, maybe grocery store that you always visit, or a family member's house, doesn't matter, but it's just a route that you know really well. And you get home, let's say, and you realize that you have absolutely no memory of driving home. Have you guys experienced this before? And it's always a little bit jarring. And we kind of go, I hope I didn't run any red lights or anything, or run any stop signs, you know? And I can promise you that you didn't, because all you did was you probably were letting your mind wander. So you got lost in your subconscious mind and you were just on autopilot for the driving. But your subconscious mind has everything in it. It knows everything you know. It has every experience, every book you've ever read, every piece of knowledge. So it knows the rules of the road just as much as your conscious mind does. And even if you did run a stop sign, you would have noticed it. Like your subconscious mind would have brought it to your attention and made you go, oh crap, I just ran a stop sign. So if you got home with no incidents, then I promise you drove perfectly fine. Okay, that's just the nature of the subconscious mind. So again, just to show you that we do this all the time. And what that means is that you must have already been using your subconscious mind to write what you have written. You all have partial scripts, manuscripts that you've written, scenes, even maybe just premises that you've written down or ideas. It's not possible for those to come from your conscious mind, okay? It would be like me demanding that my heart take over breathing for me and my lungs start pumping my blood. I mean, do they work together to make sure all the systems function correctly? Of course. And your subconscious and conscious mind work together too. But you can't ask for one to function in a certain way when that's not its job. It's the function, it's not the heart's function to do the oxygen exchange. That's the lungs function, right? Okay. And similarly, you cannot create from your conscious mind because it doesn't house your creativity. That has to come from the subconscious mind. So if you've ever written anything creative, and clearly anyone listening to this has, then that means you have used your subconscious mind before, but you were kind of doing it on accident. Okay. You weren't being very intentional about it. Just little bits and pieces of creativity are filtering up through your conscious mind and getting out. And what I'm telling you here is that you need to learn to use it very intentionally and not try to force your story out from the conscious mind, okay? So we have this myth of the muse. People like to say the muse is capricious and only comes to the lucky few, but that is not true. Nothing could be further from the truth. You can call the muse on command. You really can. You just have to understand how. And once again, if you're one of those people that are saying, yeah, but sometimes it doesn't work and I really can't make it flow, I believe you 100%. But it's because you're trying to force your story through your conscious mind instead of your subconscious mind. Okay. And then we get into that place where we're trying to force the ideas out and our brain just shuts down. The subconscious mind can never be forced. Okay. It's something that you have to surrender to. You have to relax and let the ideas flow. So if you're stressing out about your story and trying to force the ideas or sentences or words to come, then you are using the conscious mind rather than the subconscious. And that's why you can't do it. You're putting stress on your brain. To tap into the subconscious mind, you have to relax the brain, let the ideas flow. So think of brain dumping, brainstorming, free writing, journaling, or even just letting your mind wander. Okay, that might be the easiest way to explain it. Anytime you're lost in your thoughts, in your memories, letting your mind wander, you are in the subconscious mind. And that's what you need to do when you want to come up with ideas for your story. Okay. So think of a time when you have a word on the tip of your tongue and you can't bring it to mind. So a word, a phrase, maybe somebody's name, that one actor that played in that one show that one time, and it's right there and you can't figure out what it is. But then you start doing something mindless and suddenly it pops into your head, right? And by mindless, I mean something you can do on autopilot and let your mind wander. So it could be walking the dog or just taking a walk, doing housework or taking a shower. You know how many people get light bulb moments in the shower? It's because so many of us, when we're showering, end up getting lost in our subconscious mind. Our thoughts are just wandering, okay? And then we start having all of these breakthroughs and ideas. It's a real thing, right? So what's happening there, again, when you call that, when you can't bring something to mind, it's on the tip of your tongue and then you get it, is that you were stressing out your brain when you were trying to force it to come. Oh, I've almost got it. It's on the tip of my tongue, right? You're mentally trying to force it. And understand the answer was there. Your subconscious mind was trying to supply you with it, but you were blocking it, okay? Because you were trying to force it and putting stress on your brain. Then when you relaxed your brain, the answer came through, plain and simple. The same happens with your creativity, okay? The instant you get stressed out about it, you're blocking it. and your story simply won't be as good. But if you relax your brain and let the ideas flow, you're tapping into the well of your unique subconscious creativity. And your story will not only be easier to write, it will be much more emotional. Why? Because your subconscious mind is also where your unique identity is housed. Okay. So you may have heard me say, if you followed me for very long, that there are stories inside you that only you can tell. And I like to tell my students that even if we all worked off the same outline, same characters, even character names, same world, same plot events, we would still all write vastly different stories. And that is because we are so different fundamentally, right? Your subconscious mind houses your memories, your experiences, your beliefs, your culture, your family and upbringing, your traumas, your joys, your sorrows, every decision you have ever made. And I was talking about this before too. Every book you have ever read, every fact you have ever learned, everything is in your subconscious mind. And all of those things, again, subconsciously, you're not realizing this is happening, but they color your writing and seep into your voice. So that's why we will always write different novels, even if we have the same outline, because we're all different people with vastly different experiences, right? So we all know that there aren't truly unique stories, right? It's the details that are different and that appeal to different kinds of readers. But I want you to think about what I've already said about the subconscious mind. The only way to write a truly unique story is to write it from your subconscious creativity. And I like to call this a soul story because it comes from your unique subconscious creativity, which means you're going to have a ton of passion for your story. And the emotion you have for it will bleed through onto the page and the reader will feel it too. Okay. Which is why your story will always fall flat if you write it from your conscious mind. And again, you can't really write it from your conscious mind, but it's when you're trying to force it into or out of a template or trying to force your brain to come up with answers or ideas. Okay, you're literally blocking your own unique creativity when you do that. So I want you to maybe answer me this in the chat. Is it making a little more sense to you why you so often stall out when you try to write your first draft? And why it can be so hard to figure out your first draft, given that you may not be writing from your subconscious creativity, that you may be actually blocking it, that you don't have a plan. Anybody have any thoughts on that while I get some water? Okay, totally. Yep. Good. Okay, so let's talk about my number one tip for getting the ideas to flow from your unique subconscious creativity. Structured journaling about your story. Now, don't dismiss this and don't knock it until you've tried it. Lots of people journal, but most people journal for personal introspection and self help and that sort of thing. Not that many people actually journal on their story. Some people do. And if you are already doing it, then you are ahead of the curve. But when I say structured journaling, what I mean is asking specific questions about your story and then relaxing your brain and just letting the ideas flow and writing them down in journal format. The thing about journaling, the reason that it's so powerful and that people so often have breakthroughs when they journal is because it kind of forces you to relax your conscious mind. And so when people are having a problem with something and they just can't figure it out and then they start journaling on it, they start getting all these light bulb moments like, oh, yeah, that's why that's happening. Okay, this is how I can fix it. It's because that's what they're doing. They're tapping into their subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind will give you all the answers that you need. It has all the answers that you need. So this is what I'm proposing you do for your story. And this works really well to get you through writer's block because you're literally just asking for downloads from your subconscious mind to solve your story question. My character is here at point A. I need to get them to point B. What's that going to look like? And then just start journaling. You may not use anything and everything that you journal on, but it's likely to knock some things loose and to give you some ideas for how to overcome whatever you're struggling with in your story. So, um, the only reason I have ever seen this not work is because people didn't do it. 100% of the time, if they did it, it worked for them. Okay, so it's something to think about if you get stuck. All right, let's move on to sign number 3 that you're going to have trouble finishing your story. You haven't ever healed energetic blocks or traumas. Once again, this is just coming into the mainstream and people are more familiar with it than they used to be. But not everybody is. So that's what I just said here. Energy work and healing childhood trauma is becoming more mainstream. People are really grabbing onto this kind of healing because it works. Okay, it really does. And here's the thing. We all, meaning all of us authors, all of us who want to write fiction, should be able to sit down and write our stories, start to finish, without any resistance at all. Should, being the operative word there. Okay, assuming we have planned our stories, know how we're going to get the emotion in, and are crafting from our unique subconscious creativity, we really should be able to sit down, start writing, and keep writing until the book is completely finished. And of course, allowing for not doing it all in one 100-hour stretch. I just mean anytime we sit down, we shouldn't have any resistance to it, okay? But we all know that it's not that simple. Sometimes you're doing everything else right, but you still feel this inexplicable resistance to getting the words down. Have you ever felt that before? You just can't get in the right headspace to actually write words, right? And of course, as always, it could be sometimes that you're too tired, or that you need to take a break, or but assuming that all other things are equal, sometimes you still have the resistance, and there is a reason for that. Somebody tell me, if you can, in the chat, what kinds of thoughts do writers have that keep them from getting their writing done? I'm talking about like limiting beliefs, really negative thoughts. What kinds of things do you or other writers think about themselves that keep them from being confident in their writing? Can someone tell me in the chat? Imposter syndrome. Not good enough. Yes, thank you, Marcy. Exactly. Sounds stupid. Yep. Definitely. Not smart enough or creative enough. Yes, exactly. So you guys know what I'm talking about. And those are some of the exact ones that I put here, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not creative enough. What if my story is stupid? What if people hate it? You see how those match up so well? Not right technique. Yes, very good, Jan. Yep. Okay. Whether you realize it or not, again, subconscious mind, it literally means you are not conscious of it. It's these kinds of thoughts and beliefs that create resistance to writing your story, even if you've done all the right things physically. Okay. In order to accomplish anything, we need to be aligned both physically in the 3D and emotionally or mentally, energetically, whatever you want to call it. We need both the conscious and the subconscious mind working together. So we need to have our mindset dialed in. If the mindset is not dialed in, we're going to have a really hard time finishing our story. And it's the same way if you go in the other direction. Let's say we have an awesome mindset. Well, we still have to sit down and do the physical task of writing the story, right? We need both. And most people are, they know how to sit down and write their story. They sometimes have a hard time doing it. And what they're missing is the emotional aspect, or the energetic block that's there. So these blocks come from traumas that we have experienced previously. And when you clear them, you will be amazed at how easily the words start to flow. It's the same thing with sales. Once you get your book written, we can actually block our own book sales because of these beliefs operating in the background. All right. So if you don't know how to clear energetic blocks, thereby clearing resistance to your writing, this is just another thing that's tripping you up. Okay. Every time I hear one of my students ask, but what if my story's boring? But what if the reader doesn't like it? But I only wrote 400 words today and they aren't very good. I know that they have some of these energetic blocks, and that's why it sometimes takes them years to finish their books. So, I mean, again, it's not your fault. You don't know how to clear these. It's not something that's taught in our space, like at all. So, how do we clear these traumas and get rid of these energetic blocks? The actual processes for them are not terribly complicated, but they're a little beyond the scope of this workshop. But there are things like meditation really helps to kind of clear all the junk out of your mind. It usually isn't quite enough if you have really big traumas that you need to heal, but I use things like EFT tapping, and also stuck emotions. I use the body code modality. So you are welcome to look those things up, because they're things that you can do on your own. I do also teach them inside my programs, but my point here isn't so much to show you how to do this as to let you know that when you are having a hard time finishing your book, it's not your fault. And it's not that you're lazy or that you can't commit or that you're not creative enough or that you're not smart enough. There are actual things blocking you that you are not aware of. And what I have seen both in my own writing, my own life, and in other authors is that when you clear these things suddenly, it's amazing how easy it is to just sit down and start typing. And you're like, wow, why was I so resistant to this before? Well, because before you had a block and now you don't. And it really does make a difference. Most of these, just so you know, are simple, easy, painless. We're not talking about re-traumatizing you or years of talk therapy or anything like that. And again, this is why people are really latching on to these kinds of energetic healing modalities, because they work and they're easy, right? They're not painful. Again, if you aren't doing them and you're feeling the resistance to finishing your story, despite doing everything else right, you probably have something blocking you. And until you figure out how to unblock yourself, you're going to have a hard time finishing your book. You may even be blocking your own subconscious creativity, which means you'll have a hard time writing your soul story and getting enough emotion into your story no matter what you do. So we need to take care of these things. And number 4, sign number 4, you are trying to do this all by yourself. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, writing a novel is pretty solitary, right? And I'm not talking about letting anyone else write your novel, but we do all need a little bit of support. We all say, I can do this. I'll get my story written. I'll just make sure I sit down and write the words. But if you haven't already established a really solid writing habit, trusting yourself to do something you aren't currently already doing is a lot like trusting a 10-year-old boy who has stayed up till 2 a.m. several nights, 5 nights in a row playing a video game when he promises he'll turn it off and go to bed at a decent hour tonight. Yeah, chances are it ain't gonna happen. This kid is like everybody's younger brother, right? So don't get me wrong, we can eventually establish really good writing habits, and then we don't need the accountability as much anymore, but we have to get those writing habits in place. Accountability is what helps us establish good writing habits. And you guys, I am more guilty of this than probably anybody else in the room. When I first embraced writing and knew that's what I was going to do, I was in college and I several times, not just once, 2 or 3 different times, decided to take a semester off to get my book written. And yeah, it never happened. It never got written by the end of the semester. So our best intentions still cannot stack up usually against a habit that we have not created yet. Okay. So all I'm talking about here is needing a writing partner or a writing group and a specific time to show up. We all know that there are just too many distractions otherwise, too many other things demanding our time. And even if we set up, personal writing time for ourselves, I'm going to write from 7 to 8 o'clock tonight. If we haven't burned that writing time into our calendar with iron, it's just too easy to skip it for today and do something else, right? And especially if we are putting up resistance because we don't have much of a plan for our novel and maybe have some energetic blocks. I mean, we're stacking the deck against ourselves by doing this, right? I have watched my students, other authors who show up in my accountability groups, go from really kind of being shy and tentative and writing 300 to 400 words per session and having a ton of doubt about that and a ton of doubt about their stories. And then I've seen them go from that to knocking out sometimes 1,200 words per hour. And while they still may have questions about some parts of their stories, as they go through, as we all do, they tackle the overall story with much more confidence and intention. Okay, and it's just because they showed up and were using accountability to get their writing done. And eventually, if you just keep showing up, you'll get there. Like anything else, we have to stack it and create the habit. And this transformation for them happened in only a few months of showing up regularly a couple of times a week, right? It doesn't take that long. But when we're trying to do it ourselves, and therefore we're only showing up for ourselves maybe one time in 5, it's going to take way longer, right? So if you're struggling to get your story finished, especially if you're struggling to find time to write, you need accountability. Trust me. And not having it is a big sign to me that your first draft is not going to get finished anytime soon. It's just mostly like a numbers thing. Most people who do not have accountability, it takes them a long time to get their draft finished. There are probably a few who that's not true of, but most. And most people who do have accountability, they get their draft done in record time, and they improve by leaps and bounds because they're showing up regularly to work on it. Just to give you a little rundown of my author critique group, I've been with the same group for years. And we've all become really good friends because we meet weekly and we always say things like this to each other. We have changed each other's lives in a lot of ways. I know that sounds overly dramatic, but because we've become such good friends, we've become such, it's hard to be a creative, especially in a world where if you're in a world or a family that doesn't have very many creatives in it, which I don't have too many in my family. So it's nice to have other people to lean on and to talk to and to geek out about stuff with. And my critique group has definitely changed my writing. Number one, I started attending a critique group when I was in college, and that's what helped me to finally get my book written because I knew that every single week I had to have pages written to send them. So it was accountability, right? But we use a critique group to help us make our stuff better, to edit our stuff, to tell us what's working and what's not. And they have made my writing so much stronger. Okay. So I would not be where I am today as a writer or even as a teacher of writing without my critique group. So I am going to very, very, very strongly recommend that you find some sort of partner. It doesn't have to be a whole group. If it's just one other person writing partner, that's fine. But some sort of accountability, someone to help you and support you and that you can help and support. This picture shows people meeting in person, but we don't meet in person. We meet over Zoom or we actually use Teams, Microsoft Teams, but any kind of software that allows you to meet, you can meet virtually. So you don't have to do the gas up your car thing. But I really, really recommend that. There is nothing that will improve your writing faster than writing with a group, than sending pages every week and getting them critiqued and having them critique your pages and you critique their pages. When you are critiquing someone else's pages, you're integrating all the lessons that they are giving you and that you are giving them. So your writing is going to grow and strengthen by leaps and bounds if you do that. Okay. All right. So let's do a little recap here of the 4 signs. Sign number 1, you have no plan for getting emotion into every part of your story or what will happen in it. So in order to fix that, I'm just going to recommend before you actually sit down to write a scene, make a little plan, okay? Even if you don't have your whole entire story figured out, even if you don't know the ending, just sit down, make a little plan for what's going to happen in the scene you're going to write and be as detailed as you can be, and then write. And it's going to make all the difference. You need the plan. Sign number 2, you are trying to force your story out from your conscious mind rather than tapping into your unique subconscious creativity. So the next time you're trying to figure out your story or get the words to flow, I want you to notice if you're trying to force them. If you're sitting there going, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm not getting up until I figured this out, you are stressing out your brain. Stop doing that. Instead, take a deep breath. Allow your brain to relax. You're literally relaxing your conscious brain. And just let the ideas start flowing. And one of the best way to get into the flow is to journal, okay? Don't knock it until you've tried it. It really, really works, and it'll change your world to start journaling on these things. Sign number 3, you don't know how to clear the resistance or energetic blocks to your writing. This one is going to take a little more work if you want to figure out how to do this, because you would have to do some research on some different modalities. But I recommend either EFT tapping, that stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, or something like the body code that clears stuck emotions. It really does make a difference. It really does help. And if you take the time to figure that out and to learn that, you're going to notice a difference. And number 4, the sign is that you're trying to do this all by yourself. So I highly recommend you find a writing partner or a critique group that you can swap pages with regularly and learn and grow together. Okay. Inside my membership, I've actually had several of my students who joined at the same time come together into their own critique groups, and they're doing really well together. And I'm so proud of them for that because I know it's going to help them so much. Okay, so that is pretty much what I have for today. For your homework, I want you to journal on some part of your story that you're struggling with. And it's completely up to you, whatever you're struggling with. Are you struggling with a particular scene? What needs to go in it? Are you struggling figuring out what your ending is going to look like? It doesn't matter. Whatever you're working on that you're kind of hung up on, I want you to start by brain dumping everything you already know. Now, this is an important step. Don't skip this. You probably know more than you realize that you do, but there's this weird phenomenon where if it's in our mind, it's actually kind of hard to communicate it on the page because it's kind of nebulous and we haven't nailed it down. Okay, so what we're actually trying to do here is we have the answers, we have the story in our subconscious mind, but we have to bring it into the 3D so that we can get it on the page. So when you start writing everything you already know and you're actually just stating it, whether you're writing it on a piece of paper or typing it out, you're going to be surprised how much you already know. And just doing that is going to make you aware of things you didn't know before, or at least not consciously, right? So start by brain dumping everything you already know. Then I want you to take a moment, take a deep breath, and ask your subconscious mind to help you figure out the answer that you're lacking. Okay, so let's say you are trying to figure out the ending of your book. Okay, we'll go with that. First of all, write everything you already know about the ending, everything that you know needs to happen because you've already set it up in the ending. Then take a deep breath, and literally you can ask your subconscious mind questions, and it will answer you, right? Sometimes it answers through the journaling. But you can just say, I need to figure out what my climactic point in my story looks like, and I want to figure that out this session. And then just start journaling. Okay, let the answers flow. See if you can figure out the answer to your current problem. Once again, you do not need to use everything you came up with, but you're just really letting all the ideas come through. So don't throw anything away. Don't dismiss anything. Just get it written out, get it journaled. I make this joke all the time. I always say journal to exhaustion. And no, that does not mean journal until you're so tired you keel over in your chair. It just means journal until there's nothing else coming through. And then chances are you're going to have a lot of possibilities. And from there, you can look at it a little bit more consciously and decide what's going to work for your story. Okay. So no idea is wrong. If it ends up not serving your story, you can just throw it out later. No big deal. But leave it there because it may, even if it won't serve your story, it may jog something loose. Okay? Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.